Like most people that love pop culture discourse on social media, you've more than likely come across stan wars, stans comparing their faves with other stans' faves. And while some of these comparisons are comprehensible, others are absolutely ridiculous comparisons that makes no sense and deserves no merit at all. Nonetheless, these ridiculous comparisons exist, and it makes me very angry. Especially when people are comparing the greats with the mediocres. As I said, this has me fuming. So much so that I, a grown man, is compelled to talk about it on the net. As you know, it's my duty as your pop culture boy, aka your connoisseur, to investigate these grave matters that you, the people, clearly need answers to. So for this video, let's talk about artist comparisons. Is it toxic to compare? And I'll tell you why comparing mediocres to the greats is nasty work. I am Donnie Pop Culture Boy. Let's get into it.
Catastrophic.
I want to first start off by saying I think it's okay to compare artists, even if they are not from the same genre. And it's also good to compare because we can come to conclusions on who is better and who's not, which is subjective. Sometimes people can get very upset when artists are compared, especially online, because certain platforms, i.e. Twitter, where these conversations frequently takes place, are done in the most immature, disingenuous, triggering way, or done only to form engagement, which leads to a toxic discourse. And this has only gotten worse since 2024 as Twitter now pays for engagement. And I know some of you watching are probably saying, well, YouTube does the same thing. True, but at least with YouTube, you can hear or see if someone actually cares about the topic. Meanwhile, on Twitter, you can't really tell if someone's being sincere as you can't hear or see their actions. On the basis of comparing, I don't think it's toxic to compare artists with one another. Anyone can be compared, but I think the issue lies when the conclusions is about who's better. And sometimes the conclusion is not about who's better, rather comparing certain aspects of a group of artists. Just a little scenario of mine. In one of my videos, I compared Adele with Alicia Keys when she was in her prime, which was jarring for some people who said it was a bad comparison. But all artists share similarities and can be compared. It's no different from everyday people that work a 9-to-5. You are constantly being compared with your colleagues/co-workers on a performance basis, which is acceptable for everyone. But when you compare artists, enters a massive wave of people telling you that it's toxic, but don't have the same energy at their jobs. In that video, my conclusion wasn't necessarily about who's better, rather their successes and them having a similar musicality and how that intersects racially, resulting in a wide commercial gap for the two artists, i.e. Adele completely washing Alicia Keys commercially, when Alicia does have an edge musically in my opinion. Alicia Keys in her prime embodies rhythm and blues a lot more convincingly than Adele, who I love by the way, but is more one note and less rhythmic, less soulful. They both embody the traditional singer type beat, but Adele sells like crazy. People comparing musicians are nothing new, and these comparisons materialize in a variety of ways, whether a certain name in music is labeled a copycat or labeled this generation's version, insert veteran's name. And also we compare artists' popularity. Example, Taylor Swift has been named this generation's Beatles in terms of impact and influence. Now, more on Taylor in a bit. Michael Jackson and Elvis was compared. Also, Michael Jackson and Prince were compared. Madonna and Lady Gaga, Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston, Lil' Kim and Nicki Minaj, and this phenomenon goes on until infinity and beyond. Comparing for argument's sake is fine and can be fun, especially when we are comparing musicians as they all have that commonality. But it gets dark when the comparison is between mediocres and legends. Example, saying Jojo Siwaka is better than Pink. I literally just made that up. A significant comparison in music happened in the late 90s when a young Christina Aguilera catapulted to popularity with her 1999 song Genie in a Bottle, only a year after Britney's debut single, Baby One More Time, impacted teens around the world. Now, here's the thing. Both artists were on the all-new Mickey Mouse Club for 2 years and shared that teeny bopper image in their debuts. They were compared so much by fans and the media to the point where it's speculated that the two had a real-life rivalry, despite them being cordial in public back in the day, which is unfortunate, but that's one of the side effects of comparing pop stars, and anyone for that matter. It can cause a rivalry or competition. In my opinion, while the media tried to pit them against each other, their comparison was reasonable. They both were blondes, the vibe of their music was similar, hence when Christina made her more enhanced debut a year after Britney's, it resulted in people seeing Christina as an alternate to Britney Spears. Watch this.
And nothing sells better than a good old-fashioned cat fight. Well, there may not be any real claws bared in this one, just music in the case of 18-year-old Britney Spears and 17-year-old Christina Aguilera. Stacey Sweet with details.
In one corner, Britney Spears. In the other, Christina Aguilera.
It does seem like Christina is more of a pure singer than Britney is.
Britney Spears is kind of like the most popular girl in school that they all want to be like.
It is shaping up to be the music battle of the new century. Two teen queens in a race to the finish. The big question, will one of them leave the other in the dust?
Even though I think Christina's maybe a better singer, I think Britney is in a better position to be able to transition into a different sort of career.
Britney Spears caught our eye first with her chart-topping Baby One More Time. But out of nowhere comes Christina Aguilera with her hit Genie in a Bottle.
What do I attribute my success to? Faith and belief in myself and hard work, of course.
If you split it right down the middle, there are similarities. From a young age, both have been in the limelight. Both were fellow members of the Mickey Mouse Club for 2 years. And now both are star cover girls.
I think clearly that there's room for both of these girls.
But there are differences. Britney's gone quickly from a sort of teeny bopper look to all-out sex pop, while Britney's from the Madonna school of shock style. Christina's a little less in your face, and some say a little more approachable than Britney.
Britney and Christina are different, I think, in terms of their imaging.
The real face-off is yet to come. Both singers are up for Grammys in the same category, Best New Artist and Best Female Pop Vocal. And as in all contests, may the best performer win.
But 17 Magazine reports that in the popularity contest, Christina consistently beats Britney in their reader popularity poll.
Now, I want to talk about why you shouldn't compare the mediocres with the legends, and comparisons that doesn't make any sense that can actually kill one's career. And the first comparison I want to talk about is the Normani is the next Beyonce, Janet Jackson comparison / discourse. Now, I know Normani's fans hate my guts, and y'all think I hate Normani because I said her albums suck, but I don't. I actually like Normani and want her to be better. Nonetheless, in this case of Normani, these Beyonce comparisons that plagued her actually harmed her career. Because Beyonce is still here, still active, and Beyonce's fans who would have probably made a natural migration to Normani's side felt some type of way due to these comparisons, which leads to resentment. A similar situation to this was when Ice Spice's leaked messages revealed she called Nicki Minaj delusional, and at that time a large portion of Ice Spice's fans were Nicki Minaj's Barbs. Hence, when those messages leaked on the net, the Barbs started to resent Ice, in turn turning against her. Also, comparing Normani to Beyonce really set her up to fail, as Normani doesn't measure up to Beyonce in any capacity. No impactful hits outside of the Khalid song, and while Motivation did went platinum and it served as a statement piece, it wasn't impactful enough, or the hype died down really quickly. Somber career, that's not Beyonce at all. On the other hand, back in the early days, i.e. the 2000s, people compared Rihanna and Beyonce, which actually helped Rihanna's career because Rihanna stands on her own, has a completely different sound, and she had hits right out the gate. So instead of people turning on Rihanna, they flocked to her side, which built needed tension and a rivalry, the type of rivalry that helps both parties. And yes, Rihanna was accused of copying Beyonce a lot, a statement I disagree with. I more so believe that Rihanna debuted at a time when it was Beyonce's world and was trying to be that type of singer that was mainly about vocals. Also, Rihanna had a personality which made it harder for the Beyonce comparisons to stick. Meanwhile, Normani is more of a blank canvas, so her image couldn't challenge these comparisons, which made her appear more like a knockoff version, which isn't what you want. Moreover, comparisons can help, but also cause a lot of damage. Comparisons only work for those who have their own thing going on. In the comment section of my video on Normani, her fans are saying she's bringing back dance like Janet Jackson, which is crazy talk. People were also comparing her to Ciara and Brandy. I'm sorry, but some of these fans, not all, but some of these fans need to be banished to a mental asylum. Probably Briarcliff in American Horror Story, for those who don't get the reference. Now the reference is ruined. Moving on. Since the late 10s, pop music has been under construction. Pop music as a genre became less potent. If you can remember, the sound turned a lot more emo and heavily infused with hip-hop and trap. Take Halsey's Without Me, a heavy electro R&B pop staple, which peaked #1 during the dominance of hip-hop, was one of the few pop hits in 2018. While pop music quietly faded to the back of the genre list, hip-hop rose to higher heights on the totem pole throughout this decade, leading many pop fans to grapple with the death of the genre. But at last, in 2023, an unlikely singer, Tate McRae, whose initial entries composed of emo girly pop, reintroduced herself in one of pop music's abandoned subgenres, bubblegum, a callback to the bubblegum queen, the one and only Britney Spears.
Tate McRae is like what you would consider the new age Britney.
I would confidently say that too.
Tate McRae's videos. She is so talented. People are calling her Britney Spears of our generation.
While Tate McRae revealed her final form as a pop princess, many started to compare her with Britney Spears. And while I see where people are coming from, and I understand these comparisons, the gap between them is immeasurable. For Tate to be seen as the next Britney, or to be seen as the Britney Spears of this generation. As when Britney debuted in the late 90s, her debut album sold like 2 million copies in the first 2 days. Meanwhile, Tate's debut studio album, I Used to Think I Could Fly, first week sales were so dismal, Billboard did not even report it. While I do like Tate McRae, music-wise, she's on the mediocre spectrum. And guess what? That's what sells. I think what's happening is Tate is inspired by Britney and Christina Aguilera as well, but I think more than anything, Tate is more of a callback to the times of Britney when pop music reigned supreme. A time of pop bands, dancing in front of your TV days, and 90s Max Martin. I get the comparison. They both have that digital, heavy auto-tune voice, but Britney's music has a lot more soul in spite of her artificial production. And while I like Tate, the problem I have with her music is that it rarely displays a human element. I think a better comparison would be a Ciara or a Tinashe, because like Tate, their music doesn't stand on its own for the most part. It all goes hand in hand with their dancing. Like, that's where their true talent lies. And my comparison is not rooted in who is better, not at all. Just want to make that clear. While Tate McRae is an artist of this moment who's killing it in her own right, however, in the days of Britney Spears, she wouldn't stand a chance. I think one of the most ridiculous comparisons is between Dua Lipa being labeled this generation's Madonna. Meet the Madonna of Gen Z, says British GQ. Now, I know I made a video about Dua Lipa in 2021 where I defended her during her mediocre accusation days and said she wasn't, but when people make statements like these, it can set up these new artists for failure. Madonna's career spans 5 decades and counting. She secured timeless iconic hits such as Like a Virgin, Like a Prayer, Material Girl, Papa Don't Preach, Vogue, and many more, and is the best-selling female artist of all time with a reported 400 million records sold. I get it, Dua Lipa has great songs, but standing next to the great Madonna, she is mediocre. And Madonna isn't only commercially successful, but a risk taker in music and in all aspects. She's not afraid to break the rules. Meanwhile, Dua Lipa isn't nearly as interesting at this point in her career. Plus her last album, Radical Whatever, came and went faster than you can say. Now, in the female rap sector, comparisons roam rampant. More specifically, malicious comparisons. Case in point, this diva, Nicki Minaj, and her non-biological sons.
Because all these bitches is my sons.
says the generous queen herself in response to her obvious influence on the other female rappers. But what I want to talk about in this segment is how comparisons can be malicious, whether if the comparisons have merit or not. The last set of rappers who really got the Nicki Minaj comparisons to the point where they are considered clones are Doja Cat and, more recently, Doji, who is probably getting dragged online by a barb at the moment. I will admit that there are similarities with the three rappers, but to be real, a lot of these similarities existed before Nicki Minaj, but because Nicki is the top female rapper, she gets credit for everything. The Barbie persona, acting stupid and cringe, the voice changes, all of this existed prior Nicki Minaj. These tropes have been used right across the board in entertainment for years. Again, I get the comparisons and I agree they are similar, but like Doja Cat, Doji is transitioning into her own and have a completely different approach than Nicki Minaj. Now, Doji has a unique situation at the moment, as her comparison campaign has turned into her being accused of being an industry plant. I've said this before and I'll say it again, industry plant doesn't exist. One, everyone has a different meaning of what an industry plant is. Anyways, Doji's industry plant allegations are rooted in jealousy and just pure hatred, as these claims all stem from, why are you getting successful? I find it crazy that prior her winning a Grammy, everyone was loving her, and after, here comes the hate train by random Twitter accounts following 3,000 people with 20 followers, while paying for a blue check mark, talking about she's an industry plant and she's an overnight success. I think the pandemic has done a number on a lot of us where we don't remember that artists are supposed to be pushed for exposure, i.e. getting features, magazine spreads, appearances. If Nicki Minaj came out today the exact way she did in 2007, people would call her an industry plant because Nicki, like other artists, then were forced on us. Nicki was getting features every single day and performing at every award show. Even Rihanna, y'all would call Rihanna a plant as well because she was putting out an album like every year. Doji has been grinding for like 10 years. I made a video about it along with other artists that struggled for years before blowing up. Go check it out. It's pretty good. A pretty good video. Yes?
Yes.
Now, a comparison that made sense was the Michael Jackson and Chris Brown comparisons. And for me personally, this is mainly in the past, as I don't believe Chris Brown is trying to fill MJ's shoes anymore. And now he's just Chris Brown. He has found his own sense of artistry. But back in the day, there was no one else that compared to Michael Jackson. And that's mainly in the vibe department, as Chris Brown didn't come close to Michael's impact or sales and influence, obviously. But the vibe check, Chris checked that box. The charm, the dancing, it was all MJ, and people accepted it. Unlike the women, men in popular music don't get compared as much despite a lot of male artists being literal clones and copies of each other, and when they are compared, it's not as sensationalized by the media for some reason, but to be real, I think people in general do not care. We will accept all male artists being the same person and not complain, or if acknowledged, it's done in a positive way, but for the women, it's all this vitriolic energy. I think the media mainly cares if it's like a feud, example the beef with Kendrick Lamar and Drake, but comparisons for men, it kinds of leads to nothing for the most part in my opinion. Meanwhile, the women get chewed up by the media and the audience. Beyonce's Cowboy Carter tour struggles to sell out, says this news outlet a few days ago. In their report about Beyonce's tour not selling out at the rate like her last tour Renaissance did, the hosts also started comparing Beyonce with Taylor Swift.
Now, for a big story making waves in the music world, it looks like all the single ladies are staying home as Beyonce's Cowboy Carter tour, it is struggling to sell out. Let's bring in News Nation entertainment expert Paula Froelich with the scoop.
Yep.
Paula, all right, let's talk about tickets for Beyonce's 2023 Renaissance tour. They were a hot item. The tour grossed over $500 million. What's going wrong here?
There's a lot going wrong here. So, unfortunately, I think they oversold or were oversold on the idea of a Cowboy Carter tour. Now, here's the deal. When it premiered, it did hit #1 for 2 weeks, but then the numbers cratered, and it sold 70,000 copies. However, compare that to something like the Tortured Poets Department, which sold 2.6 million on its debut. it just kind of cratered. It was a miscalculation to call for a tour. The album was fine. She won a Grammy.
Yeah.
This is great. She did not win a country music award. Several reasons. Number one, she said she alluded to the fact that she had never felt welcomed by the community.
Right.
Then she said this is not a country album. This is a Beyonce album, further alienating the country music fans.
Sure.
And also kind of not bringing in any new fans. Now, her actual fans right now are economically exhausted.
Right.
Remember, she just went on tour 2 years ago, and the prices, as you know, were very different. So, I mean, you were just telling me that you saw her 2 years ago.
I did. And Beyonce, I bought tickets for Cowboy Carter. Those tickets were $100. The same seat for Taylor Swift was $900. Same exact seat. I mean, there's an $800 difference. Taylor Swift's tour grossed $2 billion. She did 149 shows, 51 cities. Beyonce's tour is much smaller, though, right? 30 shows, 8 cities.
Well, let's really compare it to Beyonce's Renaissance tour.
Sure.
Because Beyonce's Renaissance tour, she did 56 shows, 30 cities, 10 countries. But this tour is only, it's 30 shows, 8 cities, 2 countries, United States and London. And it is kind of shocking because she's a major mega star with instant name recognition around the world. And it's not selling in the States or in London. And so you're just kind of wondering, you know, A, what's going on? And B, is she going to end up like Justin Timberlake singing to 11,000 fans at the very end of his tour in a 60,000-seat arena?
She was the industry standard. Has Taylor taken that title from Beyonce?
Yes. Taylor's taken that title from everyone. Unfortunately, it now seems like everyone, there's Taylor and then there's everyone else.
As I mentioned earlier, any artist can be compared, but when you compare just for the sake of comparing, or comparing when it's unwarranted or nonsensical, like in the situation, as they insinuated that Taylor is better than Beyonce or every other artist because she charges more and still sells more ticket at a faster rate, doesn't make any sense. Now let's be real, compared to Beyonce, Taylor is pretty mediocre. And if some of you are saying, well then, why can Taylor do these insane numbers? As I mentioned earlier, mediocrity when done right comes with big rewards. And by that same standard, if Dora the Explorer sells more than Taylor, then is Dora better than Taylor? You see how nonsensical that comparison is? Beyonce challenges the status quo. Beyonce offends people with her music and presence in the culture. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift is pretty safe, more digestible. And I like Taylor Swift, but she is mediocre. Granted, very high on the spectrum, but still mediocre. And that's okay. Also, in order to translate so easily with every audience, you can't be a table shaker like Beyonce. It's one thing to compare when it comes to numbers, and leave it at that. But the host, especially the lady in the green, her point of view stems from the stans on Twitter who are still upset that Beyonce won Album of the Year and Best Country Album at the Grammys. Granted, it's been a month since the Grammys and people are still upset. Now, I checked Ticketmaster myself, and based on what I saw, the Paris shows were sold out. The London shows were almost sold out. The seats are selling. I think what's turned a lot of people off are the resellers, which is shown in red on Ticketmaster. It looks like these resellers are charging 10 times the price, but I'm sure the prices will decrease as the dates gets closer, which is from April 28 to July 14. Her California shows, now that's where you see a lot of blues, meaning available seats on Ticketmaster, which I am not surprised by, seeing LA recently had those fires and she's doing like 5 shows, which is a bit much in my opinion. But again, these shows are planned months, years in advance. If the tour sells out, great. If not, sucks for Beyonce, but life goes on. She'll be aight. With the lack of originality within the music industry, comparisons, whether reasonable or nonsensical, will become more prevalent. And while people constantly cry for originality, the artist that generates the highest streams, most hits, and acquire the most wealth are in most cases the mediocre ones, proving that most of us prefer mediocrity at the end of the day. What do you think, my grand babies? I'm Donnie Pop Culture Boy, and I will see you in the next one.